Welcome to the Peepshow Podcast.
Your glance at sex and social justice.
With Jesse and PJ Sage. Welcome back to another episode of the Peepshow Podcast. This week, on December 17th, Tumblr enacted a ban on all adult content. We have two guests with us today to talk about the impact of this ban on marginalized communities. Erotic artist Jaymie Delight and genre fiction writer Sunny Moraine.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Peepshow Podcast.
Welcome.
Today, we are talking about the Tumblr ban.
Yeah, I guess the adult content ban on Tumblr.
Right. Yeah, that's what I should have said. So, I mean, really, Tumblr is just banning itself because it's basically banning everything that it was known for from the site. So, kind of a bummer of an episode, but
we have very lovely guests.
Yeah. I'm actually super excited about...
For both of them, yeah.
So we're bringing Sunny Moraine back, who was one of our first ever guests.
Yeah, they were on the second episode.
And we are also going to interview Jaymie Delight, who I've been following for years and am a big fan of.
Yeah, well, Jaymie draws cute butts. I mean, really, what's not to like? I don't know.
Touché.
Yeah. So we get to talk to Sunny about erotic writing and fan communities on Tumblr, and we're going to talk to Jaymie about erotic art and porn on Tumblr. And so they're going to come at it from different directions and talk to us about what sort of impact this ban is going to have on their work and on their communities and on their lives.
And on niche and marginalized communities on the site more broadly.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I really wanted to do on this episode was to talk about how the sort of internet censoring and bans that sex workers have been talking about since Fosta Sesta, well, since before that, but in full force since Fosta Sesta, are also having really profound impacts on people outside of the sex work community as well. And so we were really intentional about wanting to bring on folks today who don't identify as sex workers, but who are also having their work and their communities impacted by these draconian laws.
Right. Sort of collateral damage in this whole Fosta Sesta thing.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose before we jump into the interviews, we should give some real quick context on what's happening here with the Tumblr ban. For people who aren't familiar with Tumblr, it's a blog platform in like the loosest sense, lets you post a whole range of content. Originally, it was an independent company. It was bought out by Yahoo. Yahoo, in turn, was bought out by Verizon. So now it's owned by this megacorp.
Which is like the worst megacorp that ever existed.
Or at least has the worst customer service corporation that's ever existed.
Yeah, okay, all right.
No, but there's not a lot of evidence that they really care in any way about Tumblr. It's just this asset they've gotten stuck with in acquiring a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Tumblr itself made some negative headlines recently because on one of the million blogs that are on Tumblr, somebody managed to post some child pornography. And as a result, Apple pulled the entire Tumblr app from the App Store. And so to get back into Apple's good graces, it seems that Tumblr has instituted this really wide-reaching ban on all adult content.
Well, it doesn't seem like they have. They have.
Well, I just meant I don't exactly know what their motivation was.
Yeah,
I think in part also probably just Verizon didn't want negative headlines.
Right, yeah.
And what troubles me with all of that is just this idea that because you have this critical mass of people using iPhones and who are dependent on the App Store to access various parts of the internet, Apple, in essence, is able to censor what we as adults have access to and what kinds of things we can share and who can talk about their sexuality in what way. And that just feels very troubling to me. I mean, we kind of knew that potential was there, but the fact that Apple is now asserting that power feels very scary to me.
Yeah, it feels scary to me, too. I don't want Apple to decide what I can watch and what I can't watch and what I have access to and what I don't have access to.
Me neither.
Yeah, so this is actually a really good segue to a new idea that we have with the Peepshow Podcast, which is that we were concerned about the fact that artists and content creators and writers are getting pushed off of the platforms that they work on, and we're trying to think of ways to highlight their work.
Well, and I just thought it would be really cool.
Okay. So tell us what your plan is, PJ.
I mean, it's simple. We're just going to each week select like an artist or content creator or someone we think is doing something really interesting or beautiful, and just highlight that and share that on our social media and encourage you all to follow and support them. Hopefully we'll get to interview some of those folks. We might not interview all of them, but we really just want to use our platform to support really cool creators in whatever way we can. So yeah, keep your eye out for that. Definitely send those folks some love. The first person we're going to highlight is Jaymie, who will be interviewing later on this very episode.
Yeah, and we've already put 2 of her pieces up.
Yeah, so I guess we should probably just go ahead and start the interviews, eh?
Yeah, that sounds good. Sunny Moraine is an author whose fiction has appeared in Tor.com, Lightspeed, Clark's World, and Strange Horizons, among other places, and they've been working with erotic genre publisher Circlet Press for almost a decade. They're also the creator and narrator of the audio drama horror podcast Gone. So thanks so much for joining us today, Sunny.
You forgot to mention one of our first ever guests.
I know. You were in like the second episode, I think. Probably second.
I think we've been dying to have you back.
Yeah, it's awesome to be back.
We're better at this now.
We were fine before. What are you talking about?
I mean, we didn't really know what we were doing. It's fun to have you back after such a long period of time.
Yeah. I could wish the circumstances were better, but...
I know. It's just getting worse every day.
Every fucking day.
I don't even know what to make of everything. So we're doing a special episode on Tumblr and on the new ban on sex on Tumblr, or at least like...
all of it. All sex.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it feels like.
Just that minor footnote, in the human experience. Let's just... why even have it?
Yeah, what's the point? What do we really get out of it?
Yeah. I mean, nobody's really interested in sex anyway, so...
No. Nobody's on Tumblr for that.
Yeah, so what do you think? Were you surprised?
Well, I mean, yes and no. I when those of us who pay attention to this kind of stuff, back when Fosta Sesta passed, I think a lot of us were like, this isn't going to go anywhere good. But, none of us really knew quite how bad it was going to be. We just had some very basic ideas in the ways in which it might be bad. But the full scope wasn't... I mean, we were just waiting to see. And Tumblr's been... I mean, I think partly this is because everything Yahoo touches dies. And when Yahoo bought them, they were... I mean, seriously, like, it's littered with corpses. And when Yahoo bought them, I think a lot of us who'd been on there for a while were like, oh, I don't think this is going to go anywhere good either. And they've been... I think partly because they've been trying to make it more profitable without actually doing anything to make it better. It didn't come as a surprise to me that they seem to think that courting advertising revenue will be better if they get rid of all of the uncomfortable content, essentially. So am I surprised that it happened? No. Was I surprised by the suddenness and the scope of it? Honestly, yes. I expected it to be more of a kind of creeping sexual fascism and less of a, no, guess what? It's all gone now, all of it.
Yeah. It does feel like that, actually, like a sexual fascism that's kind of proliferating throughout all of the internet and also all of our culture. It's really kind of crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's wild. And the other thing that I think has really been surprising and interesting and funny, and also you just want to put your head down and cry, is the way in which they've been utilizing algorithms to try to make it happen even before the ban goes into play.
Yeah.
So just completely innocuous stuff has been getting flagged. And the people who have some knowledge of how algorithms like this work have dug into it. And it seems like they're using this open source AI that's using like 2 neurons or something. It's like the most simplistic thing they could possibly get. And it's not a situation where like it will get smarter as it goes. It's always going to be stupid. It's never going to be able to do this reliably. It's insane.
Just to kind of step back, I mean, it is the case that even though the ban doesn't technically take place until the 17th, I know that a lot of people in our networks have been posting that they've already gotten takedown notices or things saying that different posts of theirs have been flagged. And I guess that's a product of these algorithms that you're talking about.
It's happened to me. I've posted completely innocuous, absolutely safe for work stuff, and it's immediately like in 30 seconds gone flagged.
Wow.
Yeah.
Also, my blog is not, unless you can't swear, my blog is completely safe for work most of the time. And every now and then I'll post like, art that happens to be nude, but like it's not my porn blog, but I don't know when this happened, but it got switched to not safe for work, and nobody can find me in their searches anymore. I've basically been shadow banned for no reason.
Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So to talk about that, why don't you tell us first how you used Tumblr for your work?
Oh, God, I honestly mostly use Tumblr for fandom. The thing is that because I'm a science fiction and fantasy writer, there's so much overlap between my fanish persona and my professional persona. In fact, like the lines are so fuzzy that they're almost not there. So I use Tumblr for friends, just to talk to friends. I use Tumblr to just post pictures I like. I use it to do some blogging, although most of it's images and GIF sets and stuff like that. And I also use it to do announcements about my professional life. So if I'm doing a reading someplace, or I've got a new thing being published somewhere, or I'm doing something new with a podcast, I'll post there too. So it's not like, I would say in terms of professionalism, hang on, a cat's like scratching my chair. In terms of professionalism, I think Twitter is a lot more important for me day to day, but Tumblr is kind of my all-purpose creative outlet. So if I was a sex worker, it would be much, much worse for me professionally. As it is, it's just really inconvenient and unhappiness making. It's not so much a problem for me professionally. I'm not looking at a loss of income. I'm not looking, thank God, in anything regarding my safety being compromised. But I'm watching a lot of other people taking really big hits. And I'm also watching people who really depend on creativity for their mental health being gagged, essentially. And it's really upsetting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. More broadly, it seems like, what you were talking about in terms of fandom, that a lot of the issue with this policy is that it seems to threaten community, right? If communities have organized on Tumblr around talking about different topics of sexuality, or in a lot of the cases of fandoms, a lot of that is sexual, like it is sexual fantasies, with regard to whatever your fandom's around. But if you can't have those conversations, then it would seem that you can't have those communities. And that really concerns me for mental health reasons and for other reasons. It seems like that a lot of those communities might take a big hit.
Yeah, for real. Especially those of us who have various kinds of queer identities, and we're also fanish. For a lot of us, for me, certainly, like fandom is kind of where we worked out how those identities worked. We kind of found out who we were by writing fan fiction and reading fan fiction and talking about, okay, here's what I think the sexuality of this character might be. And is this character actually bisexual? And that just hasn't been dealt with in canon. And what would it be like if this character was gay and this character was gay and they got together? And what would it be like if everybody in this particular canon was really kinky? And it's just, it's a safe space to explore identity with characters that you attach to in a really strongly emotional way. And if that goes away, and it's taking a really big hit right now, and I don't know what's going to happen with it, that's going to hurt people. It's not just going to be upsetting. It's like people are going to be hurt by it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it seems like Tumblr was the one major social media platform that you could do that. Twitter allows some of that kind of content, but it's Twitter. It's, 240 characters now, or 280, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You're not really writing long form fiction on, I guess, short form fiction. I don't know what the words are, but you're not writing even short stories on Twitter, right?
No.
I mean, people do really creative stuff with Twitter,
not
but
traditionally, yeah.
Tumblr, one of the benefits of it was that it was pretty flexible in terms of the kind of content that you could post, in terms of links and also just the format with GIFs. And it just gave you a lot of options. Mm-hmm. And it just doesn't seem like when Tumblr goes away in a few days, there's going to be a mainstream social media platform left where you could do or have that kind of fandom community and share that kind of content.
Not really. I mean, right now it seems like a lot of people are looking at Pillow Fort. I've been looking at Pillow Fort too. It seems like it's trying to replicate a lot of the stuff that Tumblr did well. And it's also bringing in more like threaded commenting, more discussion features that are kind of from a site like Dreamwidth, which is old fandom. But Dreamwidth isn't so much image heavy, and you can't there's not like rapid fire blogging, so it doesn't do what Tumblr does. But Pillow Fort is doing some really uncomfortable, strange things with its terms of service regarding what kinds of sexual content it will and won't allow. And a lot of us aren't sure what's going to happen with that. So
could you speak a little more to that? Because I've heard a lot about Pillow Fort in the last couple of weeks, but I'm not super tuned into any controversies.
Yeah, I like it. And one of the reasons why I was getting excited about it is they've said pretty explicitly in their terms of service, look, we will allow not safe for work content with very few restrictions. And it was that very few restrictions that in retrospect we ought to have paid careful attention to, because it wasn't specific. And a couple of days ago, they announced that they were not going to allow any artwork, not photography. Photography doesn't enter into this at all. We're not going to allow any artwork that featured characters who appear to be prepubescent. On the one hand, yes, I can see why they wouldn't want to feature that kind of content, and it's their right as a platform to decide not to do that. But on the other hand, how is somebody going to be evaluating what does and doesn't appear to be prepubescent? Like, is it small breasts? Is it no breasts? If it's no breasts, then what does that mean for trans people? And what about, like, you can be dealing with fairies. Like, what about non-human creatures that have humanoid characteristics? How are you gauging their ages? And a lot of people were like, yay, no child porn. But those of us who actually pay attention to this kind of stuff are like, whoa, you're not being clear at all about what will and will not be allowed. And if you're being unclear about this, what's next? So we're all very nervous now.
That isn't happening in a vacuum, right? Part of the Tumblr story is that Apple took it out of the App Store for a period of time, supposedly because there was some child porn found on a Tumblr blog.
Yeah, it squeaked through.
Yeah, right. Not that that was in any way common, but it happened, and so they pulled the entire app down. And so that, I guess that was a big motivator for these new terms of service. But also, if we go back in time a little further, if we like step back a year and a half, FetLife had some similar issues. I think there was actually cartoon porn. I think it was like Simpson knockoff porn. So it wasn't even technically illegal. Yeah, but there were these claims that there were images featuring child pornography, and for some significant period of time, payment processors refused to work with FetLife until they revised their terms of service. And what that actually meant is that they had to disallow a lot of other content like Needles and Blood that had nothing to do with child porn, but child porn seems to be like this wedge that then opens up onto censorship of a lot of other content, which is not, of course, to argue in favor of having child porn. It's just to say that there seems to be this trend that these conversations with a lot of platforms start with discussions of child porn and end with limiting much or all of adult content on a site.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course it tends to be the more uncomfortable stuff that follows from, oh no, we cannot have child porn, which we absolutely can't and shouldn't. But it's like, yeah, blood is really disturbing to a lot of people. Needles are really disturbing to a lot of people. So that's why, especially people who do queer porn, especially people who do trans porn, are like, we're next. Like, we are fucking next.
Yeah, because it just ticks down the line from like the things that are thought to be most outside of what's normative down to the center. To the point now that, like, in Facebook, for example, they're not even allowing people to mention sex.
That blew my mind. I'm not on Facebook really anymore, so I only found about it after the fact. But it was like, I can't even imagine personally using Facebook anymore. If that's, like, I don't use it anymore anyway, but imagining being restricted to that degree in terms of what I can say, it's like, how do I use a social media platform without talking about this stuff?
I know. That was my thought too, I only have a Facebook account for the work that I do, and I post the podcast and I post my writing and the events that I'm doing and all of those because I'm a sex writer. All of that stuff has sexual content. Like that would mean that I cannot put anything that I do on Facebook.
I'm sure the ban is going to be selectively enforced. I expect that people who fly the flag of journalism will have a greater degree of flexibility than people who claim to be artists or sex workers or, erotica writers or a whole range of other things, or just queer people on the internet.
It's a slippery slope, starting with sex workers and then moving to everybody else.
I don't disagree. I just think what we need to wait and see now is how this gets enforced. And my guess is it won't be evenly across the board. It's going to almost certainly disproportionately target marginalized sexual groups.
It always does, literally always.
I'm sure heteronormative humor and stuff will be tolerated.
You mentioned FetLife's problems with payments. I mean, I think that honestly that's turning out to be a lot of what comes into play regarding choke points, because I feel like even if platforms want to be permissive about their content, if places like PayPal are really putting the screws to them, then there's not much that they can do about it. So the role of payment systems and money in how all of this is working is really disturbing to me. The distinction with Tumblr being that's free. So yeah, with them, I just think it's about distaste and it's about advertising revenue. But the thing about it that just, how things can surprise you and not surprise you at the same time. I think after 2 years of the Trump administration, we're all kind of familiar with that feeling. It was like, who do they think their users are? I couldn't understand what their thinking was regarding who they expect to use their platform after this.
I'm not convinced they care. Honestly,
I don't know.
Since Verizon bought Yahoo, I just don't even know. I have to wonder if they just don't even care anymore about Tumblr. Because I agree. It just seems like they are killing the thing that set Tumblr apart from other social media, right? They are, the thing that was thriving on Tumblr, or at least historically thrived on Tumblr, in ways that it didn't elsewhere, they're now killing off. So what's left? On what basis are they going to compete with other social media? Why is anyone going to use Tumblr anymore?
Yeah, it was there for two things. It was there for sex and it was there for fandom. And both of those things are out now pretty much.
And I just have to wonder if this is just Verizon being like, it's not worth it. We don't care. Tumblr can die. We make $1 bajillion doing other things. But in that case,
but why even acquire it in the first place?
Why not just spin it off? Yeah.
That's what I don't understand. I think it's as good an explanation as any I've heard. Like I said, Yahoo in and of itself has this trail of social media corpses in its wake. And yeah, Verizon is too big to care.
Yeah, right. I think they're just, all they want to do is avoid scandal, right? Because they're already making insane amounts of money putting wires in the ground. This is so tangential to their overarching business that I don't know. I think it could be very possible that they just regret acquiring Yahoo in the first place. All of this is just such a trivial amount of money to them.
Yeah, so they don't care if they destroy an entire community or multiple communities.
Yeah, multiple communities and multiple marginalized communities, which is important.
Again, what reason do they have to care? Especially marginalized communities are not swimming in cash. So
Right.
And nobody is going to stop paying Verizon for their internet just because they killed Tumblr. I think a lot of people don't even recognize their role in that. And in any case, they have a monopoly in so many places that what choice do you have?
Yeah, we basically can't stop paying them. We kind of have to.
I'm in that situation too, and I hate Verizon.
Oh, they're terrible. But everybody's terrible. But they're very terrible.
They're very terrible, and it's every single time I call them, I want to die.
Oh my god. Oh, it's just it's soul killing.
So yeah, the thought of them taking over so much of the internet is just a terrible thing.
I think it's important to talk about what is being lost with Tumblr or Tumblr as we know it. But there's also this attendant conversation about, is Twitter next? I feel like that's under everybody's breath as we're talking about Tumblr. And I've argued that the difference is with Twitter, it's not a tremendously profitable company, but it's also not owned by some megacorp, right? Like
that's the key. That's the key.
It has to stand on its own. Twitter is Twitter's business model. And I still think that Twitter has a degree of independence, that and the fact that journalists and the fact that the president uses it to communicate directly with the American people. I think, I can't fathom Apple ever pulling Twitter from the App Store because they would get just torn apart.
There's no way. There's no way.
First Amendment, free speech issues. Like, not that they are actually legally obligated to make Twitter available because they're not, but I think culturally speaking, people would eviscerate them were they to mess with Twitter. And I think Twitter
who's
must
on
know
Twitter
that.
is like the press and the president.
Right.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of porn in the background, right? And we're all just like, doing our thing. But there's a way in which the fact that it is so heavily used for journalism and politics, I do think shields Twitter. It's seen as political speech in a way that fandom wasn't, or, really cool GIFs on Tumblr weren't. And so I do think that they have a degree of cover. I just don't know what they do with that. And if PayPal or whatever, if these payment processors refuse to service them or somehow like cut off their advertising revenue, I could see that sort of thing happening maybe. But I don't know that I could see it suffering Tumblr's fate of like getting pulled down from the App Store. That just seems really implausible to me, given that it's used so heavily by politicians and journalists to communicate.
I think that's right. And I think that that's really hitting on something important that we've already kind of talked about too, which is that, marginalized people have strong representation on Twitter, and Twitter's obviously been used almost since its inception, since it really, blew up. It's been used as a means for marginalized communities to organize and to work on narratives and messaging and stuff like that. But everybody's on Twitter. And Tumblr really was for marginalized communities in a way that Twitter's just not. And because of that, it was intrinsically more vulnerable.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Its broader reach actually protects it some.
Ironically.
Yeah.
I never would have thought the place of all the Nazis would be safer right now.
Right.
Yeah.
No, we rewind to 2012, 2013. I'm not sure I would have imagined that this is where we would have been. If someone pressed me, I wouldn't have been like, oh, Twitter is going to be the last bastion of porn and erotic art on the mainstream web, right? That's not where I would have put my money.
No. I tend to think about websites in terms of space. I imagine it in terms of spaces. And I think the way these spaces overlap and the barriers to entry and how easy it is to just kind of walk in versus whether or not you actually have to know how to access it. With Tumblr, pretty much all spaces were open to you. You could go anywhere, you could do anything, and it was very, very visible. And that visibility made it so attractive to marginalized people and people with marginalized sexualities. And that visibility made it weak.
It wasn't just visible. It was flashing and in your face, right?
Yes.
It was just you jump in and
absolutely.
it had kind of a Vegas or maybe a MySpace feel. I don't know, pick your flavor. But there was, it was flashing and it was bold and it was immersive and there's just stuff all over the place. And that's a very different experience than what you get with a Twitter or an Instagram, which are very kind of confined to these rigid formats that often are pretty static, maybe a little more dynamic these days than they used to be. But, everything's kind of has its nice little box and it's all nicely contained. And then you can scroll on to the next thing. And with, Snapchat, it's basically invisible to you unless you are already connected with somebody.
Right.
So Yeah. It just seems like it's really different. Whereas Tumblr was this wide, flashy world that you could immerse yourself in and just explore. It kind of defined the internet rabbit hole,
Exactly.
as this kind of Alice in Wonderland experience.
Exactly. You could just disappear into it for hours. And just going through it reminded me a little bit of how people described the very early web, where you just would follow link to link to link. I never experienced the web that way, but I experienced Tumblr that way.
Yeah.
And that sense of fluidity and dynamism is, I haven't found it on other platforms, not even on Twitter. Twitter can be dynamic too, but it's dynamic in a very, very different way. I feel myself mentally and emotionally engaging with it in such a different way.
Right.
Yeah. Whatever is there after the 17th, it will, I think, be something very different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And smaller and sadder.
And I don't know who will be using it. Like, that's the thing.
I'm kind of interested morbidly, but...
I know. Who is that devoted group that's going to... I don't know. I actually don't. I don't know that there is. Like I said, I'm not convinced that there is a strategy for keeping Tumblr alive. They just see Tumblr as a liability. And if it happens to, like, resurrect itself and make a bunch of money without adult content, I'm sure they won't complain, but... they don't seem to be putting any effort into actually meaningfully develop Tumblr as anything.
No, it's not a situation where they were like, okay, we're going to do away with all adult content, but we're going to try to develop in these other ways to kind of rebrand it and give it a new sense of identity. They're just like, no, you can't do this anymore, and nothing else. So it's like, what even are you now?
Exactly. I mean, even with Patreon, when they pulled adult content down, it was clear, like, they were going after younger people. They wanted to broaden their base, and they felt like having porn performers on the site would make it difficult for kids who are making music or whatever. And they made a decision that it would be better to appeal to a broader base of more vanilla content than to risk losing that by having adult content on the site. But you sort of understand. Now, whether or not that's going to pay off, I don't know. But there was a logic there that was pretty clear. There's no logic to this. It just seems like it's just we're going to minimize liability, and who really cares what happens to the site.
And I've read, I forget which particular publications have done, I think it was Vox, did a couple of good pieces on it, and including on some of the business decisions behind this. Like, I don't know who exactly they got in what boardroom, but they did have some tidbits about the conversations going on behind the scenes that led up to this. And they, even hearing some of what was said, it was still opaque. It was like, I'm hearing you talk about your reasoning, and I still don't understand your reasoning, because you're not really talking about your reasoning.
Yeah. I mean, this is also stressful for people who work and either in sex work or sex work adjacent, or porn adjacent, or anything that has
queer
to do with sex. Queer,
you know,
I don't even know what's going to happen to our community.
It's because it isn't just Tumblr. Like, I'm feeling increasingly, I mean, because I think FOSTA SESTA really starts going into effect in January in like a harder way.
Except that there's been all these ripple effects of the threat of it going into effect that have changed so much.
Exactly. So it's, over this past year, and especially in the last few months, I've been just feeling this, and I'm not even a sex worker, so I can't even imagine what it's like if you depend on this for your income, but just feeling as a creative person, the sense of being the walls closing in, of just being more and more embattled. And again, I'm observing a lot of this from the sidelines. So the internet itself is almost turning into something that I don't recognize.
No, actually, that's really a good point. And Sunny brought this up earlier, too, and I kind of wanted to circle back to it. We really should talk about how significant that sites like Tumblr and fandom and even like sexually explicit content can be for developing people, particularly developing queer youth who may not have access to images of people like themselves or other sorts of representations of their desires, of their self-image, of their gender identity, of, any of these things. And actually, I think there's a profound irony in the fact that so much of this censorship or prohibition on adult content is being done under the guise of protecting children, right? Like, we got to restrict adult content on these sites because if we don't, children are going to be hurt and exploited. But I think what that misses is that actually these sites also save a lot of children. That for a lot of queer children, that, you know, these are like life-saving outlets. And I just don't think that we're having that conversation enough in like mainstream society right now.
Kids, I think especially, that was my experience when I was growing up in fandom. Again, this is kind of where I worked out who I was as a queer person in a lot of respects. But something that I hear a lot personally, you know, in my communications with people who follow me on Tumblr, but also I see a lot of people I know talking about this too, is abuse survivors, and especially sexual abuse survivors, really, in a lot of respects, look to this kind of content in many cases to help them work through their trauma. Like things like rape fantasies, and even like violent incest fantasies, really, really disturbing stuff, can be ways in which people who have experienced these things and been traumatized by them, they actually can seize agency over their experiences, and they can find it a profoundly healing experience. And, you know, these survivors groups have been saying, you're not protecting us. You're making it harder for us to heal.
Yeah, I think that that's really, really important, because where is all that going to go?
Honestly, like, this is one of the reasons why fanfiction websites like Archive of Our Own are so important, because Archive of Our Own is great because they're a nonprofit. They're not beholden to advertisers, and they've made it very, very clear from their beginning, look, provided it's tagged, you can do it. If you have warnings for underage, you can write anything you want. It's all text is the thing. So it's not that images aren't allowed on that site, but if you have a hard time reading, if you don't find that you engage with text emotionally in the way that you do with images, there is still something for you with text. But Tumblr was really that for images for a lot of people. So yeah, so that's gone.
Right.
Yeah, and mixed media. I mean, that was the thing with Tumblr, is it just gave you everything all in one place. And you could have something topically, and you could have a space where you really could have a whole range of media experiences around a particular topic right there. And that's definitely a different experience than what you get on a lot of other sites, and certainly on a site that's only devoted to writing. But I mean, arguably it's, you know, similar with Instagram, Snapchat. I mean, what's so interesting is the marriage of both, you know, or the marriage of multiple types of media, so that different people in the community can contribute and pull from different kinds of things, and that there's not just like one way into it, but it really caters to a range.
It's going to have to find another way to happen. And one of the things that I do think is cool about fandom is that it does it finds a way. And I think that it will in this case too. The problem is just, again, like we keep saying, the destruction of communities, because every time something like this happens, the communities have to reform someplace else, and people are going to get lost, and people aren't going to know where to find other people. And I mean, it's like any exodus of people. Yeah. Everybody's in disarray. Nobody knows where anybody is. Group friends might or might not find each other again. It might take you a really long time to find somebody. People are across platforms. And something else that I've noticed in the past when fandom has experienced this kind of disruption, fandom as a way in which communities are organized is decades and decades and decades old. It's much, much older than the internet. Because this happens periodically. This is not the first time this has happened to fandom. Unless curators and people who've been there for a long time really try to collect all of the history and all of the information and all of the work and archive it somewhere, we lose a kind of community memory. We almost lose a kind of institutional memory. And nobody, I know what happened with LiveJournal and Strike Through and Bowl Through when they got a bunch of really adult Harry Potter content and said, you can't do that anymore. I was there, Gandalf. I remember what that was like. And I was there because I experienced it. And younger people in fandom do not remember what it's like to be embattled in these other ways. So they aren't set up to be able to deal with it when it happens again. Like, this sucks for me, but I think I'll be okay because I know how to rebuild. But we lose community memory. We lose people and we lose community memory.
No, that's right. It feels like you're burning down the library or something, right? Like, I mean, they're literally telling us we have to erase it, or they're going to erase it for us.
I've been saving fan art. I've been going around and finding really porny fan art that I love and saving it because I don't know if it's going to be there after the 17th.
Right.
Yeah, legit. Those people could be gone.
we'll put things back together. We'll find a way to make new spaces, and we'll find a way to construct these communities. It's just a question of, like I said, what will we lose in the meantime?
Right.
And that's the thing where I think the damage is going to be there regardless. You just have to try to find ways to mitigate it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. On that note, where can people find you that's not Tumblr in case your Tumblr disappears?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to delete my account, but I'm probably going to be phasing out my activity there, obviously. I'm on Twitter. If you look for Dynamic Symmetry, all one word, I'm there. That's probably where I'm most active these days. I'm also on Pillowfort under the same name. And probably Twitter and Pillowfort are going to be my two major centers of creative activity for the foreseeable future.
Okay, great.
What's your most recent book?
My most recent book? Oh, God, I don't...
Or story.
My most recent story was published earlier this year in Uncanny Magazine, and it's called Your Slaughterhouse, Your Killing Floor, and I think it's very good. It's super violent. It's basically a violent lesbian superhero story.
I'm glad I asked.
Otherwise, I don't know. I'm working on a lot of really long stuff right now, so everything that I'm working on is very much... At some point it will appear, but I have no hard news about any of it.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to have you back when you do.
Yeah, I would love to. This was really fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
We asked Jaymie Delight to be with us today. She is an artist creating feminist erotic illustrations and comics. She creates work under the brand Cute Kink because she focuses on creating erotic art that is fun, kinky, and cute. Her cartoon women have diverse ranges of bodies, skin tones, and ages. She's passionate about diversity in art, sex worker rights, and enjoying the beautiful things in life. We are so happy to have you on. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I'm a fan of yours. I love your stuff.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. So we've been trying to figure out a good time to have you on, but this is a perfect time because we're doing our whole show today on the change in Tumblr's terms of services. And so we wanted to talk to you about your art and then a little bit about your reflections on what sort of impact that's going to have on you.
Yeah. So, a lot of people did see this one coming. I certainly didn't. I think I was in a cloud of like, nah, Tumblr's the good one. And I had just recently had my Instagram account blocked, like banned, like not even just a warning, just like gone.
Really?
Yeah. And I had warnings before, but the whole thing I went in to log in one day and it was gone. And so, there's so many things to talk about, but I find my work is not so crazy in like what it's showing. I do consider my work porn in the sense of like erotica, pornography, like what are we using these terms for? I like to use porn because I find sometimes artists will use erotica to make their art seem maybe a little more highbrow versus lowbrow. And actually, I think that's part of the problem of what pornography and erotic art is seen as. We have like highbrow art. It's thoughtful and has deeper meaning, and porn is like something dirty and it's just to make you come and it's not worth artistic merit. And I completely disagree. So even though a lot of people look at my work and call it erotic art, I prefer to use pornography. I just want to say, hey, yeah, porn can be absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
And get off on something and have it be beautiful. So in that sense, I call it porn. But if you look at my work, it's pretty tame. It's really bright, really colorful. And I do mostly women at this point, like only women. And so there's not even any penetration happening. And I certainly wasn't posting that on Instagram. It just disappeared one day. And I tried, to fill out a form and get it back. And it was like, no, terms of service, forget it. So that was shocking. You feel like, oh, okay, all this community I built and all these followers I had, and now it's gone.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, you know what? Like, I'm going to go back to Tumblr because I was using Tumblr. Tumblr's like pro porn. It's like porn's all over the place. I'm going to start doing that. So I start going back to Tumblr. And we lose this too.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
The timing has been really bad for you, huh?
Yeah. Well, me and everyone else. But yeah, it was kind of shocking. And obviously now we're all watching our Twitters with anticipation what's going to happen. And I think losing Tumblr was particularly sad because most social media, you're posting an image, a bit of text. But Tumblr, you could really do long form blogging.
Yeah.
And I do like to blog on my website and talk about body image issues and feminist porn issues. And, Tumblr was a way to share those articles fully. And you could, muse a bit about what you're doing. You could share more images. It was also such a great community for sex ed, talking about body image issues, talking about gender stereotypes. Like you could really get deeper into it and have real conversations there that, those dialogues were saved under the post. And just sometimes the comments were as fascinating as the posts themselves. Yeah. And now that that's gone, we have Twitter, but it's such a short form of conversation and it's hard to get deeper and, really dive into these topics. So I feel it's very sad that we lost Tumblr.
Yeah, that was one of the neat things about Tumblr for sure. You would scroll through and there would be a series of porn GIFs and then there'd be a really cool drawing and then there'd be an essay. And this range of media that kind of mixed together, but like you said, it was longer form and it was a little bit richer in terms of being able to fit more images into the space because Twitter and Instagram are so much designed for phone use and the concern was just minimizing what was on the screen and Tumblr was much more for a larger screen and it's interesting just in that way alone the design and what it afforded and encouraged people to post was different.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as an artist, I've been drawing erotica, since high school. Don't tell my parents.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about how you got into what you're doing.
Well, I've been on the internet for a long time. And of course, when you're in the 90s and you're in high school and you get the internet, the first thing you look up is porn. Those poor kids today don't have that. It's so sad. So I look up porn. And of course, I'm an artist and I love cartoons. So I end up seeing a lot of cartoon porn. And it was kind of gross, to my young mind. It was, Disney famous characters coming all over each other. And I'm pansexual. I have such a diverse view of what kind of human I find attractive.
Yeah.
But I am really attracted to women. And I just don't like penises out of context. If it's my lover, I like their penis. But for me, when I look at porn, I just don't want to see an out of context penis. And I found that a lot of that cartoon porn was really penis heavy. I was like, well, I love to draw. I can create my own porn. So I did.
Yeah.
And I'd always wanted to do it more professionally. I guess when I was younger, I didn't feel I was talented enough to put it out into the world. And now that I am, I'm really happy with the work I'm doing. It's just sad that the internet is now closing off a bit to it. So that's where I sort of started. I really like that bright cartoon porn. And now there are a lot more erotic art sites. Slipshine. There's a bunch of other ones. And I know you're going to start featuring more artists. Oh, Filthy Figments. That's what they are. And these are websites that feature feminist, queer, women-drawn comics. So there's a lot of good stuff out there now. But when it started, there wasn't. And I knew that if I wanted something good, I had to sort of do it myself.
Yeah.
And I found there was a bit of, I would say, misogyny in those cartoons, the way that women were portrayed. And for me, it's very important that the media we see, whatever it is, porn, TV, is diverse. Because especially for porn, our fetishes and the things we like are created in our young minds.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at porn and you're a curious kid like me and you see only one body type, one skin color, this is where your fetish is going to come. Not only what you're attracted to, but what you think of yourself.
Yeah.
And, for me, I've had body image issues my whole life. One thing that really affected me was that, I work out a lot. I work out 6 days a week and I have cellulite and it's never going to go away.
I was so hoping that we would talk about cellulite.
Yeah, it's just a big issue for me.
That's one of the reasons I'm interested in your art. I used to be a marathon runner and when I was skinny, I had cellulite.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Even when I was skinnier, I still had it and it's just not going to go away. And then you research cellulite and you realize actually, that's just part of a female body, It's not actually, it was media that told us it was bad that made up this word that we could be concerned about. And so we shouldn't be concerned. I even remember walking out of a room backwards so that like the person I had sex with wouldn't see my cellulite. I mean, this is ridiculous stuff. But, I had reached a point where I was not enjoying sex because I was not enjoying my body.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't want anyone else to feel like that. This is ridiculous, and my work is very bright and colorful, thick outlines. It's not like a watercolor artist or an oil painter whose work does fit with the flaws of, the human body more easily. So with my style, I had to really think, okay, how am I going to show that body diversity, but still have these, sharp, bright outlines and bright colors? And, I'm experimenting a lot. I feel like my work's improved so much just in the last year. And I wanted to push it even further.
Yeah.
In what kind of diversity I can do with body types and showed like, man, that's hot. These different bodies are hot. And I hate calling them flaws, but like our flaws are sexy. I mean, I find that much more sexy. I've always preferred looking at amateur porn when I look at non-cartoon porn because, I just like seeing different kinds of people together. I don't want just this one body type. It just doesn't get me off.
Yeah, that's one of the things that is so noticeable about your work is that there is such diversity and there's a sort of realness in your portrayal of people. What I think is interesting, though, is when we talk about cellulite, so much of the debate is about photoshopping cellulite out of images. And what's so interesting is that when we talk about drawing, in your case, it's really about not erasing it, but actually like including it, right?
Yeah.
It's like the
That's
opposite.
very interesting.
Yeah,
I hadn't thought of it that way. That's very interesting. Yeah, it's like I'm painting the cellulite on instead of taking it off. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Well, and it feels so much more radical to me, because it's different to be like, oh, I didn't Photoshop it that much, than to be like, no, I made an affirmative decision to say this is beautiful and I created it in this image when it would otherwise not be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And with cartoons, it's a simplified drawing. So you bring it down to like all the lowest common denominator till you can see what it looks like without adding too much noise to it. So making the choice to add those things is a big deal. And a lot of artists aren't doing that.
Yeah, I really love that. Are you banned? Like you can't create another Instagram?
Well, I made a new one and,
Okay.
slowly getting my followers back. Artists have always felt, I think, safe. I say I'm not a sex worker at this point. I did a webcam when I was younger, but now I'm just focusing on my erotic art. And in sex work, there's different levels of safety, right?
Right.
So for erotic artists, it's very safe. And I think a lot of people thought, oh, erotic art, you can do basically anything you want. It's just a drawing. And it's not true. Erotic art has been banned for a very long time. There's been a lot of censorship of it, and it's come in waves of what can and can't be censored. I mean, you have the comic code of like violence and sex in comics actually still technically around in Canada.
Tell us more about that.
It's not enforced, but what's interesting is, of course, that if that law still exists, that means you never know when it might come out and you might get affected by it. Right now, we have a liberal government in Canada and things are going pretty good for us. We've got legalized marijuana. So I'm not too worried about that. But these laws get put and it does take work to get rid of them as well. Mm-hmm. And for me now, with the law stuff, these sites, Tumblr and Instagram, and I mean, even my web host are all based in the United States. So it's your laws that matter more to me, and what's going on there affects me a lot, affects a lot of the world. A lot of, these social media I think they're almost all based in America, right? Mm-hmm. So it is very important for us to see what's going on with you guys across the border.
Yeah.
Art has been censored for a long time. It's being censored again now. And I was talking about safety. And so, a lot of erotic artists thought we were safe, and we're not. And we should never have felt safe. And this is part of that. Hey, when you see someone else, when you see sex workers losing their rights, if you're involved in that sex industry at all, you have to be aware that that's going to come down the pipeline for you too. And it is coming down the pipeline for artists. And a lot of these erotic artists are also activists. And we're trying to make statements about gender and equality and feminism. Right. And now, your social media that had all that other information is also gone too. It's important to realize that if you're involved in that erotic world, even as an artist, you're not safe and your work is not safe, and you need to stand up for everybody's rights.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that you're making. And one of the things that probably isn't being talked about enough with first Patreon and now Tumblr banning adult content is that a lot of this adult content is political. A lot of it is representing queer bodies, queer identities, queer sexualities, and just non-normative standards of beauty.
Absolutely. And it's like I was saying before, when you're young, you know, you're seeing this one thing and it's ingrained in your mind that that's normal. And if we only have the big players, you know, we only have Pornhub, we only have, you know, there are comic art sites that are big, and they're the kind that just have this one particular body and one particular audience that they're looking to please, and they're going to be fine. Yeah, because they have their users and they have their site and they self-host and they're doing all of that. But it's the smaller players that are affected, and then all that diversity is gone once the small players get out of the game.
Right, because that's what made social media powerful in the first place, is that there weren't all these gatekeepers, and that you kind of had the tools to distribute your own content right there in your own hands.
Exactly.
And if you have to go through some big company to distribute your material, well, then that's going to create the same obstacles that we had prior to the internet.
Yeah, well, it also just narrows what it is that people have access to.
Yeah, exactly. That's what, like, the great thing about Tumblr in particular is that we can legitimately say that it expanded the diversity of offerings with regard to sexuality and the diversity of portrayals of beauty in the world. And part of that is that it was easy to be on Tumblr. It was easy to put your stuff out into the world. And, you know, I think when we're being robbed of access to these social media sites, you know, part of what we're being robbed of is that diversity. Yeah.
And, you know, when women were getting harassed on social media, some people said, we'll just get off. And it's like, well, that's not the world we live in anymore. Right. You can't not be on social media. I mean, certainly Internet Marketing 101 has always been have your website and then use the social media to get people to go to your website. But if you don't have social media, how are you supposed to get anyone to go to your website?
Right.
And if you can't post on it. So now my Instagram is, I do like a drawing version where there'll be a bra. You know, I'll do like a little censor version for Instagram. But even sometimes sexually seductive images, you know, like images that don't have nudity, but, you know, have like implied sexuality are getting flagged. And it's also, I think, a part of that is that Instagram is owned by Facebook. And I had a lot of success on Facebook with ads, getting people to come to my profile. And then at one point it was just blocked, and I didn't have nudity. In fact, I was working on my latex series at the time, so they're fully clothed, but they kept saying, no, these are sexually suggestive images. And even when I would post an ad that had nothing sexually suggestive except a face, it was still flagged. Once you're flagged, that's it. Like, they know that you're making, you know, erotic art, and that's that. And I am finding on Instagram some bigger erotic models are getting flagged all the time, and they're just putting stuff in bras, which is nothing even compared to some of the fitness Instagrams you'll see. And the kind of stuff you'll see there, which I'm totally cool with it, but it's totally softcore pornography. Like, let's not pretend, you know? So it's really interesting that the decisions that's, you know, I don't know if it's the algorithm that's making it, or if they have a team of people looking at each case on its own, but it's pretty obscure what they're choosing. And I'm sure you know this famous quote from the Supreme Court. What does it have his name written down? Justice Porter Stewart. So he was talking about, like, well, what is obscene, right? And it's so famous. Yeah. It's like, I'll know it when I see it.
Right.
And that's so scary, because it's like, okay, I know what you mean. You know, it means that you're deciding. It means you and your morals are going to look at each image and look at what I'm doing and decide if it fits into your narrow view of what obscenity is.
Right.
And that means, even worse, is that we don't have a list. So we can never know. If you're going to say, I'll know it when I see it, I don't have a list of things that I shouldn't post. How can I ever know if I'm doing something wrong if you can't give me a clear answer as to what obscene actually is?
Right. And the I know it when I see it is always a white Christian male gaze eye. And I think, you know, and whether it's individual people or algorithms who are reviewing these things, at the end of the day, like, there is that certain set of values that are making these judgments. And I think that this data, like you said, it's really obscure, but based on my experience and based on sort of my intuition as a sociologist when I wear my other hat, I really have to believe that those decisions are highly racialized and that in all likelihood, they tend to skew against bigger people, particularly bigger women, and framing somehow the nudity of larger women as more obscene or objectionable than, skinny white women.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, we can't even have those debates about racist beauty standards if we can't see the data on the decisions that we're making, but we let these private companies, make these decisions in darkness. And, and again, it just has a profound impact on what we get to see, what kind of images of beauty and what kind of versions of sexuality are represented to us.
Yeah, that's the sad thing about losing all of this, is that then all representations of sex and of sexuality and of bodies just get narrower and narrower as companies like Pornhub take over.
Yeah. So just, I know we're running out of time, but there's two things I just wanted to touch on. One, you said, that larger bodies are getting censored. And I have noticed this a lot. I'm sure anyone with a larger body has noticed that a skinny woman in a magazine ad can wear a bikini and it's fine. And when a larger woman wears it, same exact outfit, and it's seen as vulgar or obscene. And
my butt got PJ's Facebook and Instagram shut down.
It's true. And annoying.
Damn, of course it did.
It's the tamest
it
picture,
was just
too.
A picture of the side of my butt, like against in a hotel window. So against
it's
the
a cityscape with a silhouette of like the side of a butt. And I lost 2 accounts over that. But then you see people wearing thongs or just like a straight on butt shot, like you said, people with athletic blogs. If that doesn't even get questions, it'll have thousands of likes and nobody is like, oh, this is obscene.
Yeah. And you have to wonder, we can't help that, our tits and our ass are big. Like, it's not my fault, like this is just my body. Why is that obscene? Why is that vulgar? And someone with a smaller body is not. It doesn't make sense. It's not logical. Either both should be seen as vulgar or neither. And obviously I'm in the neither category.
Right.
But it's really arbitrary. And, we were talking about algorithms. And to me, this is one of those scary things, because you were saying there's a lot of racism, in what's being chosen. And the algorithms, people think it's a robot. It's just choosing what it sees. But the algorithm is based on previous decisions of what should and shouldn't be flagged. And those previous decisions were made by humans. And that's not just in art. That's in everything. When you look at algorithms people are trying to make for what court cases, how they should end, who should go to jail, they're not just taking the law books and scanning them, putting them in. They're saying, well, what happened previously? And how can we make new decisions now based on what happened previously? And all those previous decisions were incredibly racist. So those algorithms are racist.
I think that's super important. And the worst part is you can't even argue with a damn algorithm, at least with a human arbiter or whatever. They're looking at what you're posting and they're saying, oh, this is obscene. You can be like, well, okay, but why is this obscene and not that obscene? You can kind of question that stuff. But when we program it into algorithms, you can't even question. And then also it has this veneer of being scientific. And so people just think it's somehow true or...
Yeah, they're appealing to science, but it has a background to it.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, it's still the same old, white cis male Christian values that just happen to be programmed into a computer.
Mm-hmm. There was a case where someone was putting an ad for a museum and the Venus of Willendorf. So it's that very famous sculpture of a woman, mother, voluptuous body, very curvaceous, prehistoric man created this image. I don't know too much about it, but it's pretty well known, and it was flagged, for nudity. It's this very rudimentary sculpture, right? And it was flagged, and it's like, did a person decide that was vulgar, or is that the algorithm? It just sees nudity, this very, very rudimentary sculpture of a woman's body, and that's vulgar. Like, where does it end? And now, for me, it's like, are we censoring all art? Like, are you really censoring art? Are we so Puritan that we can't look at a nipple anymore?
Yeah, that's really scary to me.
And Instagram does say it's fine with pictures of sculptures and paintings. It doesn't say what kind. And you know what it means. It means you can go to a gallery and you can take a picture of these paintings that are classic nudes. But these classic nudes were made to entice. A lot of Renaissance paintings were commissioned to be sensual and erotic under the guise of its art, but they were made to be put up in someone's home or in their office where they could, open it up, show their friends and enjoy it for its erotic work.
Yeah.
And so to say that that isn't an erotic piece because it's historic and my work, because it's bright and cartoony and lowbrow, is erotic. I mean, I paint on canvas sometimes. If I take a picture of it, is it not count? Just because my illustration is on the computer, does that not count as a picture of a painting? So again, these laws are very, very obscure, but you can see the decisions they're making are kind of arbitrary. Yeah. And I mean, I think new erotic artists are doing amazing work, showing diversity and making statements about bodies and gender. And it's just as important as a lot of the previous work that we're building off of. And if we're going to censor it, I mean, censoring art, this is like Anarchy 101. Like, how can you censor art? Like, this is our voice. This is what we use to, to communicate with each other on a level beyond words.
So one of the other questions I had, because I've been following you for some time now, and if I remember correctly, several years ago, you did a series where you drew cam girls?
Yeah, so that's right. I was doing a Woman Crush Wednesday. And so this was when I didn't have too many followers and I wanted to broaden my reach and, get some eyeballs on my work. And I said, yeah, I'm going to start drawing erotic models that I really like. And it was great because I did make some great connections and made some friends. And yeah, I really loved it. It was such a great experience. I look back at those pieces and I really like them. And it was a great way to get real diversity. Sometimes, when you're an artist, you get this muscle memory and your hand is always just drawing the same thing. And so I found it was a fantastic way to get me to do really diverse bodies because they actually exist in real life.
That's what I thought was interesting about that project, is just that, in a sense, you were taking people who were being naked on the internet and using them for figure drawing, like seeing that as an opportunity to use them as models. But also, I think, to me, it was powerful because, like we've already talked about, it spoke to the beauty and artistic merit in what those sex workers do online. And by capturing them in art, it sort of took it out of context for a second and said, hey, actually, what these people are doing is beautiful. This is legit modeling. And we can look at it from that perspective. And it kind of collapsed that distinction between art and porn that is too often overly exaggerated, I think.
Yeah, thank you very much. I like what you said. I feel it does celebrate these sex workers. And I feel like as an artist, so I'm not putting my body out there, but how can I support sex workers who are putting their actual bodies out there? And so even though I'm not drawing them anymore on Women Crush Wednesday, I try to use my art in other ways than by giving money and by buying their porn, and these kind of things. So yeah, so thank you very much.
So what are your plans for 2019? What is your vision of what you're going to be working on in the coming year?
Yeah, so I've got quite a bit on my plate. I have this comic I've been working on forever. And because I have a day job, it's just this piece that has become so huge in my mind and it's so close to done. So that's definitely going to come out in 2019. And it's the short story of a girl going to buy her first latex dress. And she has trouble putting it on and she needs help getting that dress on. So that's my first comic. Then in 2019, I'm going to be doing a lot more butts. Definitely Monday Bunday will continue. I want to get a bit kinkier. I've been doing a lot of pinups and with this comic, and then I'm starting to put out a bit more bondage. So the kinky part of me has always been there. And I don't know, I've been hiding that away. So I certainly want that to come out more. More diversity. I had started a mature woman series last year.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. That was really cool.
Yeah. So I think I've only done 2. I have more on my computer that I haven't posted and, work got in the way. And now I think that's where I need to be heading more. I really want to explore that. And so I guess diversity in general, but definitely age diversity is something I want to be working on in 2019.
Yeah, that's really
another
neat.
thing that just seems to be underrepresented, particularly in drawing. Again, it's like one of these things that you have to really make an affirmative decision to show that diversity, to draw gray hair.
Totally.
I think it's really powerful when you see it for that reason.
Yeah, and exactly, because you're doing a line, and putting wrinkles on a character can look really bad if you don't do it properly, especially with cartoons, because usually wrinkles, you want to shade them softly, and I'm doing like these sharp outlines. So it's been interesting artistically for me to explore that and make that, the decision to do that. So yeah.
That's so cool. I really appreciate the work you're doing and the diversity you're portraying, and I think it's just wonderful, and that's why we're so excited to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Where can people find your art and your work?
So I do have a website. The website is cutekink.com. So you'll always, be able to find me there. I have a newsletter as well, and you can sign up for it on my website. So that's just a way, you get some special things there. You get coloring page, you'll get updates that other people won't see. And it's more intimate conversation with me. I don't email people too often, but I like to give something a little more intimate. And that way, if social media just decides to blow up and we never have it again, I can contact people. And then with social media, because a few of my social media were deleted, and like cute kink seems to be a popular word. So I don't have just cute kink on my social media. I've amalgamated them all to the same word, the same phrase, cute kink love. So cute kink love is my Instagram, Twitter. I just signed up for BDSMler. I haven't tried it out yet. So let's see if that is a fun thing. I also have a pillow fort. Again, I just got it, so there's not much on there, but Cute Kink Love, try me out everywhere, and you'll find me there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. That was really fun.
Thank you for joining us for yet another episode of the Peepshow Podcast. I'm PJ Sage, and you can find me on Twitter at PeachSage.
And I'm Jessie Sage, and you can find me on Twitter at sapiotextual or at jessiesage.com.
We would like to remind you that we have a Patreon account and would appreciate your support. Please visit patreon.com/Peepshow Podcast. Our music is courtesy of Joe Kennedy. The show was produced by Jessie and PJ Sage.
Signing off. Have a great week.